All right, we're trying a bit of a new format this time. Um, every time I turn the webcam on, the audio has that echo that you've heard in a couple of the videos, the ones I don't do with my cell phone, basically. So sadly, the cell phone is winning the battle. Um, a lot of my videos will probably be done on the cell phone just because I can do it while I'm walking to and from work or whatever, and it works well. So probably gonna do that. But this fight card, we're doing it this way. You can see the fight card. Enjoy that as opposed to my ugly mug. Let's roll. All right, so this is the TUF 24. We probably should have stopped after 12, if we're being honest. Seasons of the Ultimate Fighter, which leads us to this weird whole tournament to get a title shot. I mean, I guess they did this back with TUF the Comeback, and that did give us Matt Serra's brief title reign, so I guess it's not as bad of a conceptual idea, but the fact that Tim Elliott wound up winning the thing, we'll get to that. And that's not to say I'm not a fan of Tim Elliott. All right, middleweights: Josh Stanbury versus Devin Clark. I'm going with Devin Clark. He has really strong wrestling. I think his instincts on the feet impressed me against Alex Nicholson. He didn't look out of his depth, and actually outstruck Nicholson for large portions of the fight before getting knocked out. And that happens against Alex Nicholson. He's a wild man, both in the cage and out of the cage, it seems. So there's that. But Devin Clark, yeah, this should be his chance to get a big win and get rolling. Like this, he's a legitimate prospect in the middleweight division. Really good wrestling background, really athletic. Doesn't seem to have some of the usual stumbling blocks of wrestlers where they're like absolutely just uncomfortable exchanging. He seems to be reasonably comfortable with that. I'm taking him all the way here. Elvis Mutapchis versus Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith's style of fighting is exciting, but it gasses him, and I don't see him being overwhelmed Mutapsic in the first round. As a result, I'm taking Mutapsic. He's really kind of unspectacular, well-rounded journeyman, tough guy, not a particularly great athlete, but really kind of makes the most of his athletic gifts. Anthony Smith is kind of a guy who doesn't make the most of his athletic gifts, so even though he's the better athlete with a higher ceiling and so on, I got to take Mutapsi here. Kalen Curran versus Jamie Moyle. I'm kind of confused why Jamie Moyle got a signing off of a loss in Invicta. It's a bit weird. I think she's really just a sacrificial lamb here. A lot of people have been raving about Curran. Hasn't really translated in the cage. She did beat Emily Kagan, but she lost to Paige Van Zant and um, name is eluding me right here. Felice Herring in pretty convincing fashion, and also lost to Alex Chambers, although was winning that fight, so kind of give her a slight benefit of a doubt there. Taking her to win this by probably decision, maybe TKO. But she doesn't really have great stopping power like most women's strawweights, so probably the decision route. Dong Hyun Kim versus Brendan O'Reilly. I don't really care for either of these fighters. I mean, obviously I care for Dong Hyun Stun Gun Kim, but this is Dong Hyun Maestro Kim. Brendan O'Reilly is an Australian BJJ kind of guy who's on Tough Nations. His run in the UFC and really just in MMA altogether is not supremely impressive. Um, yeah. I mean, he's you know this is lightweight, which is where he belongs. He shouldn't have been messing around with fighting Vic Grujak and Alan Jouban at welterweight. Um, Surprisingly won against Vic Grujek, who I thought was probably going to be the one to win that. And of course, my picks on UFC Australia was woefully bad, so maybe take this with a grain of salt. But I'm going to take Maestro here. I really don't feel particularly great about either of these guys. I just feel slightly better, I guess, about that. Rob Font versus Matt Shell. Snell from MTV's Caged. If those of you who suffered through that show, which I did, because my girlfriend at the time would watch an MMA show with me because it was on MTV. Yeah, the relationship didn't go that well. You could probably guess that. Too small here. Kind of overmatched skill wise. Font by TKO, second or third round. Font's a good fighter. The loss to John Lineker shouldn't let us allude that he's a good striker. Grappling game is pretty solid. Um, Takedown defense is pretty solid as well. Physically, athletically gifted. Granted, the somewhat demise of Joey Gomez's career kind of blots that as his kind of not his most impressive win. That's probably knocking out George Roop, but his only other win in the UFC being kind of unimpressive now. But I mean, yeah, he should get this done. Gray Maynard versus Ryan Hall. I make it a habit not to pick Gray Maynard at this point. I think he's a fighter in significant decline, and I'm not really sure if this move to 145 is a great idea, but he beat Fernando Bruno, and this is stylistically a matchup he should be able to take. Ryan Hall is a fantastic, fantastic grappler. Those of you who didn't see him fight Artem Lobov, that was a grappling masterpiece. I loved it. I know a lot of people didn't, but I did love it. But do I think he can submit Gray Maynard? I mean, yes, in a grappling match, sure, but not in an MMA match. I think he'll have a hard time getting him down. I think Maynard's comfortable enough in his hands that he should be able to strike Ryan Hall, who doesn't look like he's particularly comfortable with his hands or particularly skilled with them. So Maynard by decision here. Brandon Moreno versus Ryan Benoit, taking Benoit by TKO. Don't overestimate Brandon Moreno because he submitted Louis Smolka, because it seemed like really Smolka did not take the fight tremendously seriously. Left a lot of openings. Moreno's game leaves a lot to be desired. He's not particularly great on his feet, not a particularly great wrestler. Benoit should have the edge with his really, really heavy hands. Like I said, Benoit by TKO. Sarah McMahon versus Alexis Davis. I'm taking Sarah McMahon to win a decision. Alexis Davis is not as good of a wrestler as her. Neither woman is a particularly threatening striker. Davis is sneakily good at submissions, but I don't see her catching Sarah McMahon. Like I said, McMahon actually probably might even be the better striker, so I'm going with her. Ion Cutelaba, Jared Cannonier. I have less of a strong feeling about this fight. I'm taking Cutelaba to get a TKO. I think he's very hard to prepare for, very athletic, very kind of unorthodox style. I want to see him do well, and I'm going to throw that as a caveat that might be blinding me, whereas Cannonier is kind of just, he's there. He'll do well at 205 because 205 is such a shallow environment, but I don't see him doing amazing things. Jake Ellenberger versus George Masvidal. George Masvidal has a lot of great things I like about him. His cardio, his well-roundedness, his mental toughness, his physical durability, but he does not know how to win rounds, and it's shown with a number of really close decisions getting taken away from him. Ellenberger does know how to win rounds, solid wrestling, very explosive and powerful striking. Looks a lot better now that he's, I believe, at King's MMA as opposed to the Glendale Fight Club. We know what I think about Glendale Fight Club and its head coach Edwin Tarvidian. We'll save that for another video. To be honest, we talked about it in depth. Taking Ellenberger here to win a decision, probably in a controversial manner. That's how Masvidal decisions go. He doesn't really ever lose convincingly, unless he gets stopped. I don't necessarily see Ellenberger being able to stop him. He's going the distance. I see Ellenberger winning, getting some of those late round takedowns, punctuating rounds properly, where Masvidal takes his foot off the gas pedal and lets the round slip away. Henry Cejudo versus Joe Benavidez. Henry Cejudo has a very high ceiling. I want to make that quite clear. He has a amazing wrestling background, fantastically athletic guy. I just question his mental fortitude, and I question his physical durability. And those are things I never want to question about a fighter and then pick them. Especially up against a guy like Joe Benavidez, who, while I don't particularly care for, from a fandom standpoint, is a fantastic fighter. He's pretty much been the second best flyweight in the world, and if it wasn't for a guy named Mighty Mouse Johnson, Joe Benavidez would be a champion in the UFC, and that's really all there is to it. I think Benavidez, really good scrambler. His striking is much improved. Probably the third most improved guy by Dwayne Ludwig, behind TJ Dillashaw and Chad Mendes. Just fantastic. And Cejudo, I think his game is still a little bit raw, and I can't get around the fact that I really question his mental toughness. Demetrius Johnson versus Tim Elliott. By the way, I also question Cejudo's weight cutting still. So, I mean, there's always a possibility that that's going to have a horrendous impact on the fight. Just taking a drink, sorry. Demetrius Johnson versus Tim Elliott. Kind of went through it. I mean, I really like Tim Elliott. I really do. He is a fantastic fighter. He's exciting. He's tough. He's well rounded. I believe he's the RFA. No, he's the Titan champion. Which he won after he got cut by the UFC, winning the inaugural one against Alardi Santos. Also has a win over Pedro Nobre since being out of the UFC. Some guy named Felipe Efran. Oh, I do know who that is. I'm not overly impressed by that, but it's there. The problem with him is that he went 2-4 in the UFC, and the 4 guys he lost to have a combined record of 0-5 versus Demetrius Johnson, and that's a tough sell for a guy who can beat Demetrius Johnson. A really tough sell. I feel like this tournament was really supposed to lead to someone else getting a title shot. But it didn't happen that way. And there was some really talented guys in the tournament that I was hoping would show up well and maybe give us a new face. And you know what? Maybe some of them still will. We'll have to see about that. But like, you know, I looked at the cast and kind of your 2 most disastrous cases for winning were Tim Elliott and Damasio Page, who I don't even understand how he makes 125, but that's that, I guess. No, I mean, outside of giving Elliott a slight power edge, I mean, the wrestling edge, the kickboxing edge, the boxing edge, the grappling edge, the clinch edge, it's the speed edge, the athletic edge. It's just all in Demetrius Johnson's favor. I see this going the distance because Elliot is a tough SOB, and I don't see him getting finished. I don't believe he's been finished his entire career. Oh no, okay, he has 2. His second and third fight were finishes, but since kind of, as it were, finding himself, he's been doing his thing and been very hard to finish. I don't see that changing here. So that's my rundown on the card. The main event is lackluster, but it should be better than the most recent cards we've seen, which were not very good. So that's kind of damning with faint praise. But that's kind of the best thing I can say. So I hope you enjoyed the predictions. Three things, I guess. Number one, if anyone wants Bellator predictions, I can work that into my schedule, but it would have to be something the fans want. Number two, I've resurrected my MMA Playground camp, and I'll be including my my MMA Simulator, the software piece I helped develop in college. It will be making picks, so you can try and take me on. You can take on the sim, and have some fun with that. If you're into such fantasy betting sites or so on, no actual money involved, to my knowledge, but it's a chance to test your picks. And the other link in there is to the Dread MMA page with the home of the MMA Simulator and its fight promotion. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will be coming at you for the next card.